In June 2015, Dylan Roof, a 21-year-old, gunned down 9 African Americans during Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. Horrified by the act, communities in the United States began to push for the removal of Confederate monuments and symbols, which to this day stand atop buildings, in parks and streets, continuing to remind Americans of a dark past. Recently, white nationalists and others gathered in Charlottesville, Virginia, to protest the taking down of one such monument, the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Things got out of hand, resulting in the death of a 32-year-old woman, Heather Heyer. To understand what's going on, we first need to understand America. Let us start at the very beginning. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, traveling west from Europe, came across a new continent unexpectedly. He took back with him tales of his travels and conquests. Inspired by his stories, European settlers, in search of a fresh start and new opportunities, traveled to this newfound land. The indigenous people or Native Americans who had lived here for thousands of years began to perish due to disease, conquests, and slavery. The Spanish built small settlements in Florida and the Southwest. The French did the same along the Mississippi River, while the British settled along the Atlantic coast. A huge workforce was needed to develop these colonies, and the Europeans looked to Africa. African men and women were put on boats and sent to this new world as slaves. They were forced to work long hours in fields without any pay. By 1770, the British had spread to 13 colonies along the East Coast. Slavery was legal and being practiced in each and every one of these colonies. Territorial disputes in North America soon led to war between France and Britain. Britain won the war, but it took a huge toll on her finances. As a result, she now looked to tax her American colonies. British families had been living here for more than 200 years and considered themselves more American than British and were unwilling to pay tax. They revolted and demanded freedom. Force and other methods of persuasion failed. After 18 long years of struggle, the Americans declared their independence. The sentiments of the American Revolution, along with the equality that was stressed in the Declaration of Independence, now stood in contrast to the status of most slaves. In the northeastern part of the United States, blacks began sending petitions demanding their freedom. The North responded. By 1804, all of the northern states had abolished slavery or put measures in place to gradually reduce it. However, things were different in the South. While the North got more industrialized, the South remained agrarian, largely dependent on slave labor. They were unwilling to let go of their slaves. States were now divided as free states or slave states. The United States began to expand through the purchase and conquest of new territory. New states were added to the Union, usually in equal pairs of slave and free states. Northerners and Southerners often clashed over the issue of slavery, disagreeing with their own party members at times. The Whigs and the Democrats were the two political parties at this time, consisting of lawmakers and representatives of both northern and southern states. Internal disagreements on the issue of slavery forced many anti-slavery Northerners to secede from their existing parties and join the newly formed Republican Party. The Whigs ceased to exist, while pro-slavery Southerners now made up most of the Democratic Party. The country was divided on political lines, and the stage set for civil war. Abraham Lincoln joined the Republican Party in 1856 and was elected president of the country 5 years later. Southern states feared that this would lead to the ultimate abolition of slavery and reduce states' rights. 7 southern slave states individually declared their secession from the United States to form the Confederate States of America. The Confederacy grew to include 11 states, and in 1861, Fort Sumter, occupied by Union troops, was fired upon by the Confederates, signaling the start of a bloody war. 3 years into the war, on January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves are and henceforward shall be free. The proclamation announced the acceptance of black men into the Union Army and Navy. 4 years later, the Confederates surrendered, ending a war where close to 700,000 people lost their lives. During the next 25 years, monuments remembering generals and other important personalities of the Confederacy went up in the South and continued to be erected during the 19th and early 20th century as well. Though slavery was abolished, racism and segregation continued. It wasn't until much later that African Americans succeeded in their fight and achieved the most important breakthrough in equal rights legislation. Many supporters of Confederate monuments claim it is their heritage, something their ancestors fought for or otherwise supported, and not about racism, while others see it as a racist symbol representing a war that was fought to uphold slavery. Today, the United States may not be divided on North and South lines anymore, but in its place, the divide between the left and the right continues to grow, and at times, taking a violent turn as well.